welcome to my lesson on how to play the main guitar solo from Steely Dan's Kid Charlemagne. This one featured special guest lead guitar player Larry Carlton. Now Larry actually played on several Steely Dan tracks, and this is probably the most well-known one. In fact, this is often considered to be the highlight of guitar performances within the Steely Dan catalog. And if you're not familiar with Larry's other work, he's a highly prolific studio session player, primarily in the 70s and 80s. Won some Grammys, played with the Crusaders for a while, and has quite a few solo albums. My favorite being the, I think it was 1978 or 79, I think it was 78, simply titled Larry Carlton. Some people call it the Room 335 album. That's the track that opens the album. But it was very cool, kind of rock, jazz, fusion stuff. He had a real smooth, buttery tone that was very sought after by a lot of other musicians back in the day. Really good stuff. I highly recommend you check it out. All right, let's go ahead and jump on into the lesson. The first lick, pretty straightforward. Here it is slowly. And should be pretty easy for most people. One thing just to call out there is you'll notice the second bend at the 17th or the 7th fret, I'm sorry, of the G string. It's a pre-bend, so you bend the note and they hit it down. The next lick, played slowly. And with that one, again, pretty straightforward. I think a lot of people miss the at the beginning. They just go instead of minor note, but it's in there. And also the sliding at the end. A lot of times I see that tabbed with a hammer-on pull-off instead, where you go. I think either one works, but to my ear, the slide is what is authentic to the slide. It's really what you do in the song. The next lick. That one, I tell you, when I first learned this guitar solo back in the 80s, I was more used to playing, you know, Randy Rhoads type of stuff where everything was kind of not predictable, but within a scale and very formulaic. But then when I hit this part of the solo, I was like, it's like, wow, that's pretty jazzy, and it's kind of out of the box. It's not something I would normally do. And so this solo kind of took me for a little bit of a ride the first time around. But the only thing I can say about this section is that first slide from 9 to 10, a lot of times people will just hammer that on, like. But I think it sounds like he's doing a slide there, and most of the tabs are that way. And then, all right, so some of you might be thinking, dude, why did you change your shirt and grab a different guitar? Well, what happened is I was editing the video after I recorded the parts, a couple days after I recorded them, and I realized, wait a second, I forgot, in this next section, I forgot the first 4 notes, so I had to go back and re-record it. So I just grabbed this PRS because it was the closest guitar. All right, I'm going to play it slowly. And again, this one's pretty straightforward. The only thing I want to mention is, you know, when you're doing this part, you don't want to let the notes ring together. You want to stop them right after you play them so they don't ring together. If you let them ring together, it's going to sound like this. It's not the sound you're going for. You want to stop the notes after you play them by lifting your hand up. Like that. All right, let's move to the next section. The next lick. My advice there is remember to keep the kind of staccato pattern of it. You're not going to let it ring out like... You see how there's a little like a choppiness in there? You want to keep that feel in there. And in addition, you'll notice that I'll use my, watch this, I'll go. You'll see how when I do that 15th fret at the B string, and when I go back to the 15th fret of the E, I just flatten my finger, I bar it. Now that might be uncomfortable for some people. They might want to do it with different fingering. For example, instead of starting with your pinky, start with your ring finger. Oops. Whatever's more comfortable for you. I use my pinky at the starting because that's where I had kind of left off in the prior lick. The next one of my favorites from this solo. And let me do it slowly because I went by a little bit quicker there. My advice there again, you want to make sure you're not letting the notes ring together when you go back down. Like, watch. Right here. So I'm not letting the notes blend. Like, it's kind of like when you're sweep picking. It's the same type of technique where you lift your finger off right after you hit it, so you don't make the note blend with the next note. And then the slide off. The next lick. My advice there again, look for that choppy type of staccato feel. Instead of, you don't let it ring out. See how I do it kind of choppy? More staccato kind of, where you're stopping the notes after you play them. You want to get that feeling right. And then when you do the, again, it's kind of, you want to make sure you don't blend the notes. Oops. The next part's probably the most tricky part of this solo. I'll play it slowly. Now you'll notice again, I'm lifting my finger off after some of those notes to make sure they don't blend together. Like if I let them blend, it would sound like this. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you stop the notes. The next lick's kind of got a cool jazzy feel to it. And again, when you're going down, you want to make sure you're not blending the notes together. I know I'm saying it over and over, but it's important for it to sound right. And that's all those last couple of notes there, it's all kind of a downstroke. Next lick. That one, pretty straightforward. A little bit of vibrato at the end. Then we go. I think the only thing worth pointing out there, it's pretty self-explanatory, is when I go, before I go. A lot of times I'll see that tabbed as a hammer-on instead. And I played that like that. I played it that way for many, many, many years until I realized that it was really a slide. But if you want to hammer it on, most people aren't going to know the difference. And then one of my favorite licks from this solo goes like this. And that one, oftentimes you see that 7th fret on the G string. Oftentimes I see that, or most of the time I see that tabbed as the 9th fret of the G string, which is wrong. And I actually played it like that for many years because that's how it was tabbed until I realized it's not. If you played with the 9th fret there instead, it sounds like this. Whereas if you play it with the 7th fret, it sounds like. So I want to make sure people are aware of that. They'll see it often tabbed as the 9th fret, but that's not correct. Fingering there is kind of weird. You see how I do it? Or you could go. I find myself actually doing both, but more often I do it this way. Like that. And then the next section, we have that little pre-bend half step up at the 10th fret of the beat and then down. And with that one, I'm not sure what there is to call out, but when you do the 8th fret bend on the G string, you let it rest at the top for a second before you add the vibrato. Then the last lick. And the one thing I want to call out there is after you bend up and you tap, you're tapping at the 13th fret of the G string at the top of the bend. A lot of people will tap on the 12th fret. That's because most tabs say to tap at the 12th fret. But it's not, it's the 13th fret. Play it both ways over the original, you'll hear it. And that makes sense because the chord underneath is a C7, which is basically a C major chord where you add in the 7th, which is B flat. And that's the same note that you end up tapping up here. So, last thing I want to mention is obviously this is a recorded example of a finger tap that preceded Van Halen's first album. This came out 2 years before. This came out in 1976. Came out 2 years before Van Halen's first album. But it's not the only recorded example of finger tapping. We know other people did it before Eddie. Eddie just popularized it. I just wanted to call that out, that this is one of those recorded examples. Where Larry Carlton learned it, I don't know. I tried to do some research and figure that out, but to no avail. Alright, that's my lesson on how to play the main guitar solo from Steely Dan's Kid Charlemagne, featuring Larry Carlton on lead guitar. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments section and I will answer them as time allows. Thank you again for subscribing, commenting, all that stuff. I don't make any money on these videos. I do it because I want to keep rock guitar alive, and I enjoy it. So with that, until next time, rock on.